everybody, and welcome to the latest meeting of the Audit and Standards Committee. Can I ask, do we have any apologies? I think everybody's here. Sorry, go on, Sarah.
Andrew Smith from Grant Thornton.
Yeah, Andrew Smith. Thank you. Okay, item 2 then. Sorry, Andrew.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies are from Councillor Barry Panther, and I will be substituting for him this evening.
Okay, thanks. Item 2 then, declarations of interest. Does anybody have any declarations they need to make in relation to any items on the agenda? No. Okay, thank you. Item number 3 then, the minutes of the previous meeting. Has everybody had a chance to read through those, and does anybody have any issues in relation to them? No. Okay, thank you. I'll take that there is true and accurate record in that case. Item number 4 then is the Q4 Corporate Risk Management Report for the year 2022-23. And Simon's going to just give us a bit of background information on that when you're ready, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. If I could take members through the officer recommendations then, please, on the front page. Beginning with 1, we're asking you to note that there are currently no risks that are more than 6 months overdue for review up until the end of Q4 2022-23. And this is the reason you haven't got any heat plans or maps as part of your document pack. At item 2, we're asking you to note that there has been 1 risk level increase from a medium C to a medium D. Now, this actually relates to Kidsgrove Sports Centre, and the risk sits within the corporate risk register, and it's been increased by corporate leadership team, CLT. And it's due to the current financial situation in respect to utility charges and the effects it could have on the CIC managing and requesting financial support from the council. A further action has been rolled forward in respect of the contract management of the risk to ensure the finance reviews are regularly undertaken. And just to say that the council has received from the CIC an interim financial report, and it's not giving officers any cause for concern at this point in time. We come on to number 3, and we ask you to note no other movement on the corporate risk register. At item 4, we're advising of a new profile that's been added in respect to the Shared Prosperity Fund. This is at a low green B rating. At item 5, we would ask if members of the group have got any particular risks they want to investigate in further. That completes the report, unless there's any questions, Chair.
Mike.
Thanks, Chair. Simon, with regard to going back to Kidsgrove, so item 2.2, it's obviously you've put a few minutes about what you've said, the energy increasing, but you've said it started to fall for the first time in 20 months. Is that actually affecting the price though that they're paying? Because won't they be contracted for a certain period of time? So I mean, I'm asking the question, I don't know a fact, but they're not on variable rates, so that they'll be in a fixed rate contract for how much they're paying for their energy. I suppose I'm asking how you've said that there's nothing in the financial report that the finance team are overly concerned about, but what's in place if the worst comes to the worst?
So in relation to the utility costs, obviously the last sort of 12-18 months, we've all seen the volatility in energy prices going up and obviously going down, but not, they started to slowly reduce at the moment, haven't they? I think as the authority and as having an agreement in place with Kidsgrove Sports Centre that we will subsidise any losses for the first 5 years up to a value of £100,000 per year. We identified that obviously this volatility in these prices, it causes a risk for us, as in, you know, what is the amount of subsidy that we might need to help the sports centre with. We've had a couple of meetings with the sports centre, just catch-up meetings, how you're getting on, kind of thing. You know, we part of the agreement is that we monitor the financial situation regularly. The sports centre's year end isn't until October, so when we were coming to prepare our year ends, we got in touch with them to sort of say, how are you getting on? We need to know whether we need to put any money aside for the subsidy side of things. They have recently sent us a snapshot of the first 12 months of how they have got on with their operating costs, and that information within that report kind of almost neutralizes this risk a bit for me. So as in they are operating really well, they're generating income, and they've got utility costs in there. I can't tell you how they procure their utilities. I don't know the answer to that, I'm afraid. But from the evidence that we've seen so far and the figures that we've seen in their P&L account, then it neutralizes this particular risk. So we'll probably look at actually going back down to a medium C, because we've had this recent information last week. Okay.
Excuse me. Do we have any other questions on this particular report? No? Okay, thank you very much. Thanks, Simon. We'll move on then in that case. Can we just note that obviously we've noted all the points and the recommendations as written. Item number 5 then, the internal audit annual report and annual opinion. And Claire's going to give us a rundown on that when you're ready, please.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the internal audit annual report that summarises all the activity of the internal audit service over the last 12 months. So covers the 22-23 financial year. And I am required under the public sector internal audit standards to produce an annual report that summarises position, and within that to give an opinion on the control environment. So jumping straight into the detail on page 17 of the report, page 7 of my report, you'll see there that just some detail there around the plan that we had at the start of the year. If you remember, that risk-based plan was brought to the Audit and Standards Committee in April. And obviously we've been using that plan to undertake the work for this year. Coming straight into the bit that you're probably interested in, that opinion on the overall control environment at 2.4 there, you can see I am actually recommending a satisfactory opinion on the control environment based on all the work that we've undertaken this year, which is obviously really positive and says that, you know, you've got all the governance and controls in place that you need, which is obviously really positive, and that's something that you can add into your annual governance statement. So just going into a bit of the detail of some of the things that we did find during the year. So over the page, on page 8, just some significant issues highlighted there. So whenever we produce a negative opinion on a report, we'll obviously report that through to you. Pleasing to report that we don't have any negative opinions on the work that we've done this year, but we do have 3 reports where we issued marginal opinions, and marginal is kind of a neutral position. So there are some weaknesses, there are some good work, but there's also some weaknesses to address. So the reports that we gave marginal opinions to, the first one was planning enforcement. So there were 13 recommendations made as part of that piece of work, and the improvements required were in respect of things like management of caseloads, processing of complaints, and the monitoring of performance information. The second one where we issued a marginal opinion was trade waste services, and there were 9 recommendations as part of that piece of work, and the improvements there needed to be around the financial and budgetary framework and maintenance of stock records. We also gave a marginal opinion on the disabled facilities grant, which was a backward-looking audit for the previous year. We made 4 recommendations as part of that piece of work, and the recommendations were in respect of management administration of information and supporting records and documentation. And we've actually got this one on the plan again for this year because there are changing processes for this year, so we'll be able to go back and look at that one again and hopefully provide a high level of assurance on that one. So in terms of summary of the work that we did undertake during the year, just over the page on page 9, table 1 gives a list of the number of audits that we gave. So we gave 2 audits, positive opinions, good opinions, 2 satisfactory opinions. So there were 50% there of sort of positive opinions. And then I've mentioned those 3 that we gave the neutral opinion to. And you've got a list there of the definitions of each of the opinions on table 2, which is, I think, always helpful to include. So over the page on page 10, when we produce an internal audit report, when we make recommendations, we track those through. So we say this thing needs to improve, you need to make this better, and then we'll track through to make sure that recommendation actually happens, so those improvements are made. So as you can see at table 3 there, pleasing to report that we didn't issue any high level recommendations during the year. We issued 18 medium and 21 low. So the status of those recommendations in the paragraph below. So at 3.4. So there were 20 recommendations that have actually already been implemented, so really positive. There's 15 that have not yet been implemented, so they've reached their due date and they've not been implemented. And there's 4 that have not yet reached their due date, so we'll continue to monitor those through. Table 3.5, sorry, paragraph 3.5 also says there are some recommendations outstanding from the previous year. So there's 12 outstanding from the previous year, which is actually an improved position. I think if you remember in the previous quarter, we had quite a few of old year recommendations. So a lot of those old ones have been cleared off now. So yeah, we're just looking at the 2 years. So that's a positive improvement. And we're going to continue to work with the leadership team just to make sure that we're keeping track of those. There are sometimes genuine reasons why a recommendation can't be implemented to the original timescales. We just need to keep an eye on those and just make sure that those improvements do get made and we can clear those off. So yeah, we'll continue to monitor those throughout the year. In paragraph 4, you've got some details there of some of the internal audit work at table 6 that we undertook during the year, the number of jobs that we undertook during the year. And we've got some that are still in progress. A bit less than that 8 that are reported there, because this is a snapshot as at the end of March, and we're now in July, so some of those have now been completed, and we'll be reporting those through at the next audit and standards meeting when we produce the Q1 position. So over the page on page 12, paragraph 6, details of the review of the effectiveness of the internal audit service. So we have to follow something called public sector internal audit standards. They set out how we operate as a service. And I think members of the committee may remember that in November, we had an external review done against those standards, and it's something we have to have done every 5 years. So as a result of that review, we did get the top standard, which was generally conforms. Doesn't sound great, does it? I know, but that is the top standard. So generally conforms to the standards. But there were a number of recommendations that they made where we could make improvements. There was none that they made that said that, we weren't complying with the standards, but they thought there was areas where we could enhance our performance against the standards. So there is an action plan at appendix 2 of the report that just shows you the work we're doing there to implement those recommendations that were made as part of that review. I'm also required under the standards to give a commentary on your risk management arrangements as part of this report. So paragraph 7 does that. So as I mentioned, when we produce our audit plan and when we undertake our assignments, we do that on a risk basis. So we don't look at everything. We have to focus on certain areas. So we'll look at the areas that we feel are most risky based on your risk registers, talking to your service managers and our own opinions. During the year, we undertook a review of corporate risk management and gave that a satisfactory opinion. So obviously that's really positive. There were some areas for improvement there around making sure objectives are being identified on your risk registers, improving the logic and profile of the matrices that you're using, and clarifying which controls and actions appeared on risk registers. We are also planning to undertake another review of risk management as part of the current year plan. So we'll be able to come back and see if those improvements have been made. Just to say as well as when we looking to the work we're going to be doing over the next 12 months, we've also been talking to Sarah about training and opportunities so we can train service managers around controls and how internal audit operates and make sure we're working together. And also maybe for the committee as well, they can have some discussions about any training needs for the committee around areas that we cover in internal audit. So that's something we can think about for future sessions. In the appendices, you've got some additional details. So table 7 is a summary of all the reports and the opinions and number of recommendations. You've got the work in progress at table 8. And then, as I mentioned, as appendix B, you've got the action plan there for the external assessment that was done of the service. Happy to take any questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Claire. You can really talk fast.
Sorry, I forget my train of thought if I don't.
Yeah, Mike.
Yeah. I used to have to work with this. Okay, back to the summary page on the original report, not your actual report. You mentioned that 50% of the work was completed and 50% was in progress and carried forward for completion in this year. I'm just trying to get my head around that. Does that mean that 50% of the work, for whatever reason, wasn't done and it's had to go into next year? And does that mean that some of the work that was forecast to be done in 23-24 has been pushed back into 24-25? Or is it just a rolling programme? I suppose that's my first question.
Okay, thank you. I'll try and talk slower. Yeah, I think I would argue that it is more of a rolling programme. So as you can see, we also brought forward from the previous year 9 audits. So I think we're constantly in this state of, I don't think we can ever plan to make sure that an audit gets completed by this arbitrary cut-off of the 31st of March. So there's always a rolling programme of audits, and we're always completing audits from one year's plan to the next. What I try and make sure is over a 12-month period, we've got the right coverage in terms of audits that we need to look at on that 12-month basis. Based on that risk profile, we're doing that over a 12-month basis. So hopefully that answers your question.
The next item is that there's 39 recommendations made during the year, 51% of which have been implemented. Is that sort of a figure that you would see across any authorities, or is that quite low? I mean, it might be that some of the reports only got issued quite literally the day before the end of the year, and I don't quite understand that, but that 49% of the recommendations haven't been done seems very high to me. Or is it just that, this is how things are, or a lot of reports were published right at the end of the financial year?
I think it does vary between authority, depending on the kind of recommendations that have been made and what the issues are about why you can't actually implement a recommendation. What we make sure we're doing is we're talking to the service managers where they aren't able to implement a recommendation to make sure that, if it's a capacity issue, or it might be, a system that you thought was going to be ready by a certain date wasn't, we like to understand why there's a reason and delay, and we're reporting that through to the senior management team so they can take action if they need to progress those recommendations. So they have that level of detail for each recommendation of, why a recommendation can't be implemented. And usually you find that actually, although we're being quite stark and saying it's not implemented versus it is implemented, they've made some progress. They've done some work. They're just not quite there with completing the actions that need to be completed. So I think probably 39% is maybe on a little bit on the high side. It's 39 that are not implemented that have reached the due date. There's 10 that haven't reached. They are the ones, like you say, that we've just made the recommendations towards the end of the year. So yeah, the 39, which are the ones that haven't been implemented and have passed their due date, I'd say that number maybe is a little bit high, and say we are working with Sarah and the team to bring those down. But say I think for each one, we know why that is. We've got the genuine reason, and we can work with senior managers to make sure that we undertake the actions to be able to implement the recommendations, which I think is the important thing.
One thing about it, if you do find that for whatever reason these aren't getting implemented, then bring it back to the committee so that we can bring the appropriate pressure to bear. Thanks, Claire. Well, Mike.
I think some of the recommendations that haven't been implemented yet are because we were waiting for systems to be, so new software to be implemented. And I know there's been a delay in some of those, particularly I'm thinking of legal now and the GDPR stuff. The supplier has delayed some of those implementations of software. So although it might come across as an officer delay, it isn't just down to officers not implementing recommendations. Some of it is a little bit out of our hands, depending on the software and new ways of working, really. I just wanted to make that point. Thanks.
Thank you, Sarah. Okay, Mike.
Just on that, Sarah. So what's the exposure on that though? So if this is just an aid, then actually it's just a delay and we can deal with it. But if this is systems that we need from a legal point of view, are we exposed by not having these systems in place?
No. So any new systems that we have, we will always run parallel with what the old system is, what the new system is, so that there'll be that handover period there. I think some of these areas where we know the new system will be able to help us do things a little bit better and report things easier, then that's kind of where we're perhaps holding off making the full implementation if it impacts on a new system, really. But no, we'd never have that exposure. We'd always run parallel with old and new.
Planning enforcement says the significant issues, so this is 2.7 on the main report. It's 13 recommendations, 5 of which are medium risk and 8 are low risk. How close did that come to actually not being a marginal and was actually a negative opinion?
It isn't always the case that just the number of you can take the number of recommendations and use that to say where the overall opinion. It's a bit more complicated. Unfortunately, it depends on the number of controls that we look at and then the number of recommendations we make against each control. So it may be, for example, there's one area that's a particular weak spot maybe, and that's got 3 or 4 recommendations, but actually there's some areas that are really strong and haven't got any recommendations. So I think for this one, by memory, we did look at quite a lot of controls because it is quite a complicated service. So yeah, we do have a matrix that, so we don't just, put finger in the air and say, yeah, we're going to go with medium. We have a matrix that picks up each of the recommendations, what control they're made against, and that's how the conclusion is drawn. So there is a matrix that pulls it together, because yeah, off the face of it, you would say 13 doesn't sound like a strong control environment for a system, does it? But yeah, there were a number that we looked at, and there were a number of areas where actually we've got really positive performance.
Well, might it be possible to see that matrix? I only sort of think about, so Ofsted, for example, they've got their own matrix, and if one item is below a standard, that's the overall score. And that's, I mean, you might not have to agree with that, but that's their matrix. So if it's possible for us to see the matrix that was used for that planning enforcement, I appreciate that, Chair. With regard to disabled facilities grant, obviously, as you mentioned, that's changing. Will these 4 recommendations need to be put through, or will the new way that the system's going to operate negate the need to actually look at these 4 medium risks, and it should be picked up as part of a new system?
Sorry, yes, yeah.
But so the new system will negate the need to fix these 4 things that are wrong.
Yes, my understanding was, I mean, Sarah can probably comment more than me, but the arrangements were with a third party and it's now being brought back in-house. Yeah. So obviously you're in control of your own destiny there in terms of your own processes then. So but yeah, we'll audit that during the year and draw that conclusion.
If I can just comment on a couple of things, going back to the planning enforcement point. Planning is one of the areas that our One Council programme is looking at the moment as well. So it is possible that some of these recommendations are going to be picked up as part of that One Council transformation programme. So systems, processes for how we deal with complaints, monitoring performance, etc. All those things are being reviewed by the team with the planning officers to see if there's any smarter ways of us working with that one. In respect of disabled facilities grants, yes, as Claire said, that was actually provided by a third party where ourselves and other authorities identified that arrangement wasn't really working sufficiently, which is why we brought it back in-house. So those recommendations will relate to that particular contract that we had. Thank you.
Claire, just going back to Mike's point about the matrix, is that something that could be easily demonstrated, or is it something that goes into a black hole in the computer and comes back out again? Yeah, I mean, all I was going to say was, if members are happy, if you could just circulate that to us, just to give us a bit more information on it, and then if you think you need more information, Mike, just let me know and we can bring it up. Okay, all right.
Promise. With regard to you very quickly, sort of on the main report 3.5, we talked about the overdue recommendations not implemented, and you said actually that the figure of 27 is an improvement, but there are still 12 items from the previous year that haven't been implemented. Are there any key reasons why they haven't been done and that have carried over into could they must have been at least 12 months that they still haven't been implemented, and we've added another 15 to make the 27. Is there any particular reason why some of these are taking so long to fix, basically?
I think, as we've already said, there are a number of reasons. Sarah mentioned systems being one. I think around GDPR, there's a bit of issues around capacity. So yeah, I think there's a number of reasons, but we are reporting those through, and we are monitoring, reporting that position through to senior leadership team, and monitoring those to get them implemented as quickly as we can.
I mean, if these are systems problems, then part of me thinks, well, it's not our fault, but at the same time, it's still an issue. And that means that issue's still been there. If it's a resource issue, it's still an issue. It doesn't matter that there's not a person there to do it. Is there anything in this report that talks about why those 12 in particular? You know, I can see the 15 in the report, but is there a reason why those 12? Is there somewhere in the report that mentions why directly those 12 are outstanding for more than 12 months?
No, there's not that detail in the report, but I'm happy to provide that detail.
Please, I'd appreciate that. Thank you, Chair.
One of the things that delays things as far as I have helpers. I think one of the things that delays things as far as completion of a risk register and signing off is when you're in the hands of other people. And if you've taken the step to bring things in-house, that will reduce the length of time that it's completed, because you'll have more control. So you're looking to the future solving of the problem of numbers of things outstanding. And if you are introducing an in-house system and changing, then for a while you have to run the two things parallel and make sure everyone's up to speed with the new system, as well as still being able to handle the old, so you can carry things through to fruition. So I understand why sometimes things are delayed. Just a comment.
Sorry, go on, Sarah.
Just another comment on that. Some of, I can't tell you off the top of my head what those 12 recommendations are. I can't remember, I'm sorry. But we have been reviewing the whole recommendations, and some of them are not applicable anymore. So going back to the One Council programme, things have changed as part of that programme, and it may well, I'm not saying it is, but it may well be that some of those recommendations have now been superseded with different ways of working, and that we don't need to make those recommendations now. So that's something now I will take away and have a look at as well, just to see if that is the case.
Thanks, Sarah. Did you want to?
Just quickly about following what Councillor Wielden said about bringing things in-house and the advantages and disadvantages of that. That has implications for scrutiny, obviously, and obviously staff training, and also for maintaining objectivity in looking at what we're doing. And I think the worrying thing is that if you spread everything too thin and you involve too many other agencies, it scatters everything. If, on the other hand, you bring things in-house, it gives rise to, if you like, a need for a different kind of scrutiny. I'm not saying better scrutiny, because I'm not saying that in-house would do it any different, but it's just that whenever you hear in-house and money in the same sentence, from a layperson's point of view, you really need an awful lot of analysis of what's going on and external supervision of activity. And there's been a lot of changes in council, including the way of working, like, you know, One Council and this kind of thing, with a view to saving money, and also with a view to streamlining the service in line with developments in information technology. It's just that we have to be careful we don't get too incestuous about this and you know, start if you like, start being a little bit too self-analytical and not looking at what's going on in other boroughs. I think it's quite important to, if you like, to bring in external agencies, whatever the cost, to look at what we're doing and to be a critical friend. If that makes any sense.
Absolutely right. And I do agree with it in some respects, but I think we have incredible critical scrutiny from the scrutiny committees at over various subject areas. So while we're doing it right, we have the greater knowledge and then therefore can be more critical in the scrutiny of things. The number of times I've been involved where they've had outside providers who thought they knew what we were doing, but hadn't quite got the grasp of all the things, that throws up its own problems. So sometimes both have their benefits, but I think in-house with the critical scrutiny committees that we've got is the best world we can have at the minute. But I do agree.
Yeah, I think, you know, this is why we need a robust internal audit system. I mean, and that's what we're sitting here for, isn't it? Does anybody else have any comments? Sarah, go on.
Yeah, just picking up on the point about working or seeing what other authorities do. We do a lot of that. So whether that be benchmarking or whether we attending groups, obviously Claire's on the internal audit group with all the internal auditors from across all the Staffordshire authorities. I sit on the Chief Finance Officer group for Staffordshire. So we're always kind of swapping ideas or discussing, you know, what issues we may have or what is an authority, what's working really well for an authority. So there's lots of kind of individual group working there. I think next week when we have full council and we talk about the peer review challenge, there's lots of reference about how well we work with partners in that report, and we do a lot of partnership working and sharing ideas and working together. So I think picking up on your point about, you know, not just doing what we're doing in-house, we do, you know, consider other opinions as well. Thanks.
Any other comments on this then? No? Okay, can we just minute that we've noted this, and we will move on to item number 6, which is the Treasury Management Annual Report for 22-23, and Sarah's going to give us some details on that.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the Treasury Management Annual Report. The CIPFA Code of Practice on Treasury Management recommends that members should be informed of the Treasury Management activity at least twice a year. Once at half-yearly updates, and then secondly, as in this annual report. Activity is required to be carried out in accordance with the annual Treasury Management Strategy, which gets approved at full council each February. The council has a treasury management advisors, which are Arlene Close, and then this particular report covers our position as at the 31st of March 2023, the economy and the investment rates in 22-23, compliance with the Treasury limits and prudential indicators as agreed by in the 22-23 strategy, and the investment outturn for 22-23. During the year, £17 million of investments were held at the 31st of March 2023, excuse me, which achieved an average return of 2.32% and generated £578,000 worth of income. The greater than budgeted income was received due to receipts in advance of government grants and the increase in the interest rates during the year. We currently have no borrowings. We've made no borrowings during 22-23, and I'm happy to take any questions. It really is a report about the interest that we earned during 22-23. Thank you.
Sarah, Mike.
Yeah, sorry, sir. I mean, I'm not sure. It might be a different figure. So looking at item 3, the Treasury position at the 31st of March 23, it says here that £17 million, but a return of 4.05. Is that figure feels different than the figure that you've just read out yourself? And I'm wondering if one is one calculation and one's a different calculation. Okay. What was? No, that's fine. What was the interest figure that you used though? Yeah, I think you said a 2 or even 3% figure. And
Average.
Right.
Average of 2.
Okay. Well, does this report then need to change to an average? Because it feels, if you're talking about an average of 2, but what's that 4.05 figure then? Is that the highest figure?
Yeah.
Right. Well, can I suggest that that's changed post?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, thank you. And just to confirm, I mean, obviously, you've said in your preamble, there's no debt. Is that still the case now?
That's still the case now.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Sarah. If you could just make sure that we amend that appropriately. Do we have any other questions on the Treasury Management Report? Okay, so can we just minute that it's been received and that we're happy for it to be reported to the full council in September? Thank you. Item number 7, then, the health and safety report for 2022-23. And George is going to give us a rundown on that when you're ready, please.
Yep, so this is the annual report on health and safety matters. So it includes any issues and trends regarding health and safety matters across the council. And we're asking the committee to note the information contained. In terms of the work ongoing through the previous year around health and safety, we've undertaken a review of a number of policies and procedures, undertaken staff training regarding IOSH managing safely, and continuation of first aid training and other regular training courses, which are delivered both in person through in-house methods, but also we have engaged outside agencies in terms of the IOSH qualifications. The report notes any accidents reportable and otherwise that took place over the previous year, whereas we're seeing a bit of a rise in terms of a return to round about where we were pre-COVID. We do have some lower areas of accidents over that period as well. Part of that might be because we are putting some more live monitoring in place, largely around the waste and recycling system, and we can use that information to highlight any trends, any concerns, and really sort of have that continuous learning opportunity for crews, particularly at the depot. All health and safety inspections have resumed as they were pre-COVID. Reports are completed and are forwarded to the relevant managers where improvements are noted and recommended. We are pausing work on the Newton Lane depot at the moment, just whilst we undertake the accommodation review of the site. So at the moment, we're only doing essential health and safety repairs on that site whilst we scope out what the plan long term is for the area. We continue with health and safety committee meetings at the depot, at Castle House, Tenants Liaison, and at J2. And we are continuing to undertake all the necessary fire drills, etc., across the sites where there are no significant concerns in terms of compliance and processes around that. So in terms of the detail of the report, the policies that we've updated over the past year, the corporate health and safety policy, corporate health and safety terms of reference, and the employee handbook were reviewed and updated. The team updated the Newton Lane traffic management plan and with in light of the removal of the reception function within the site. So there are new procedures there which are being monitored in terms of compliance as well. And we updated the corporate health and safety report policy. We're still undertaking work around the driving for work policy. That's largely with respect to health checks and ongoing health and safety commitments for the drivers, then working on the unit. So we're just making sure that we are as we should be in terms of best practice. The target 100 section 3 is our health and safety monitoring system, and we are just working through assessments within there. It's ongoing, and there's been an update to the system, which has meant we've had to refresh some of the elements in there. In terms of our training, we have undertaken the IOSH training, first aid refresher training, both online, and we are putting on some sessions face to face to support people with confidence. And the second phase of the IOSH managing safely course has been completed. Jubilee 2 staff have increased their training around evac chairs, so they can now support customer hub staff, museum staff and additional staff around the return to the office post-COVID. Section 5 outlines then the number of accidents in the 12-month period, and you will see that there are a number of 50 employee accidents over the past year, which again is fairly much in line with where we have been in previous years. The detail of those accidents is included in the graphs and in the following sections, with 9 reportable through the RIDDOR over the previous 12 months. Again, not massively an outlier compared to previous years. And the summary of those accidents and the causes of those accidents are included in the final pages, which I think show quite strongly that these are all issues that not necessarily in terms of our training or our processes, but something that was externally led, and therefore we've adapted and changed some of the processes around that. So again, no major causes for concern, and the higher reporting of near misses is actually a positive in terms of people picking up where things could have happened and putting them right. Finally, we've got the health and safety audits and inspections, and you can see there the number of inspections which have been undertaken, which is in line with the plan, with any recommendations being directed to the relevant services for action. Okay.
Thanks, Georgie. Do we have any questions? Yeah, surprise, surprise.
Make them earn the money, Paul. Okay, on table 5.2 on the report, it draws attention to 9 RIDDOR, 144 non-reportable. You've mentioned the near miss, and I agree that the fact that people are reporting them, that's a good thing. But what it does do actually is this perhaps an outlier year? Because all the progress that's been lost in RIDDOR over the last, 3 or 4 years seems to have been lost. Non-reportable have gone up year on year as well, and so have the near misses. Is this actually a good news story that people are reporting more, or that the rules have changed and we're reporting differently, or is this particularly a bad year that the figures have actually risen and all, but and it's pleasing to see there wasn't a single dangerous occurrence. That's great, but all the rest of the numbers have increased year on year quite significantly if you go back to looking at like 2021 and 2020, years like that.
So 2020, 2021 were during the pandemic, which meant there was less activity being undertaken. We were reduced to sort of statutory service in some areas. J2 wasn't open for vast periods of that time. And so that explains really that the fewer accidents and fewer issues really. So those were the anomaly years in my view, rather than these ones now. I think we're heading towards a more steady state at the moment.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, the purpose of reporting near misses is a good thing, because a near miss prevents an accident. So I applaud the work that's been done with that. I do have a couple of queries regarding some of the accidents that have been put in this report. I won't go through all of them because we know that the levels of absenteeism is the one target that the council needs to improve on. But a member of staff on July the 22nd hit by flying object, fracture. What sort of PPE do our workforce have? Obviously, I read that they have steel toe caps or protective footwear, however, but is there any other PPE that gets distributed to them?
So the risk assessments will be taken dependent on what the work is being done. So the level of PPE will vary depending on the task. This particular situation, I believe the person had a helmet as well. So that's the reason there was no lasting damage to this person. It was not something that went on beyond that 7 days. So the PPE was there, it was provided in line with the risk assessments.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, so there's anything like in certain areas of different infrastructure, are safety glasses mandatory, earplugs, etc. Any other like protective equipment?
Yeah, absolutely. So as I said, there will be risk assessed depending on that work. So down to the level of what sort of ear protection is needed, what sort of safety glasses, etc. And the different duties will have policies and procedures and safety requirements aligned to them, and the staff are made aware of those. The toolbox talks that we do, the learning from incidents that we do, may lead to some refreshments of those risk assessments or changes to the practices, but they are clear and they are undertaken, and the PPE is provided as required.
Continue. Manual handling. Do you have a ergonomics officer in place that goes and, or safety officer that goes and looks at the way that people are manual handling?
Yep, we've got corporate health and safety officers who provide support and training in terms of manual handling.
Again, thank you, Chair. I appreciate that this report only goes up to the end of February. I do have a couple more questions for you, Georgie. Is there been any improvement from when the end of this report to where we are to date?
I don't have those figures as yet. We'll do the quarterly performance as they come through.
Okay, and the one that caught my eye more than anything else was the member of the public, falling object, member of the public treated in hospital. How do you have any information on how this member of the public was come to be hurt? Are the members of staff sort of, if it was a vehicle incident, should they, members of staff, like tell members of the public that they shouldn't be near the vehicle, you know, sort of things like that?
It wouldn't be appropriate for me to go into the detail of this particular accident in this forum, but what I would say is any of these issues, any of these accidents that occur, we do take that learning forward. So if there is something that we can improve upon, we absolutely will, and we absolutely do. But that's not to say that sometimes even with the best preparation, the best processes, the best protection in place, accidents can and do obviously happen.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I have no further questions.
Okay, I've got a couple of people who want to speak. Mike, do you want to go first?
Just very quickly, I mean, Councillor mentioned the hit by the flying object. And George, I'm not sure if you were talking in around or if mentions a fracture. Did that was that member of staff back in 7 days? Because I mean that, or was that a more wider sort of response?
Again, I can't really comment in terms of the actual number of days lost by that person, but what I would say is we reported this one as was said, to err on the side of caution. We received the reporting of that accident after that member of staff had returned from a period of absence anyway. So the details of what actually happened were not as clear as they could have been when that was reported. So the decision was made to report that to RIDDOR, you know, in case that there was some learning, in case that there was a situation there. So the details and the specifics around that one aren't entirely clear.
Joan?
I remembered. Presumably there's quite a stringent process that we have to pass on to external providers who are awarded contracts. I'm thinking about the Arboretum thing, which was obviously a tree feller or something like that. Or there are quite a few external services providers. Presumably our policy and procedures are passed on to them, that they must adhere to them. They will have their own, but they're not always quite the same.
Do you mean when we might have agency staff working with us? Yeah. Then yes, they are required to work to our policies and our procedures, and they are given inductions and trainings before they come onto our sites.
And are the checks on that? Is that sort of, do they have to? I mean, I'm thinking when I worked in industry, they had to provide written responses that they had read the thing, they had watched the
Yes.
video.
Yeah, that's
It was
part of,
reported
that's
on.
part of the induction and the training process
Okay.
that they have to go through.
Those questions. Do we have any other comments or questions? No? Okay, thank you very much. If we could just minute that we've noted that report. Moving on then, we have the work programme. There was just one thing that I wanted to highlight to members. We changed the date for the September meeting. So if you've already got that in your diaries, you may need to amend that because we put it back until the 28th of September. The reason for that is that the auditors have informed us that they're unlikely to be ready to report on it until a few days before that. And rather than cancel it at the last meeting, we just thought that at the last minute rather, we just felt that it was probably better to highlight that at this stage. Does anybody have any questions, Mike?
Comment really, Chair. Obviously, the Office of Champions needs to be updated, seeing as Daniel Dickinson's left the building. So, but I mean, not flippantly, Sarah, I don't expect you to be doing this on your own. I expect another senior member of the team to come forward and do that until a suitable replacement's in place. Can you come back and tell us who that's going to be? Thank you.
Okay. Do we have any other questions then on the work plan or comments? No. Okay. Well, thank you very much, everybody, for attending. We have. Sorry. Go on.
Just a quick one.
Yeah, sure.
Just on the 28th of September, Grant Thornton will also be bringing the audit plan the same time that they bring the audit, which is not ideal, I know, but they've informed me today that that will be the case. So just for information.
Yeah. Were we going to circulate that when we received it
Yeah. So
to
once,
members? So
yeah, once I have received it, I will circulate it around just so you've got an idea before the meeting. I think it'd be helpful. And then obviously the statement of accounts, the audit findings will come out 10 days before the meeting anyway. So
yeah.
Thanks.
Okay. Right. Okay. Thank you for that. Okay. In the absence of any other comments there, we have no urgent business. So thank you everybody for your attendance, and I'll see you all next time, if not before. Thank you.